Attention sleepless nights. Thank you for consuming this OSI 74 product broadcast, live from the Black Knight satellite. For optimum performance and safety, your host, Mr. Lobo, asks that you please listen to these instructions carefully. When in a hospital or other healthcare facility, observe the restrictions on the use of electronic devices. Switch off before boarding an aircraft to prevent interference with communications systems. Do not operate this device in the presence of flammable gases or fumes, chemical plants, or where blasting operations are in progress. Always listen hands-free while driving a vehicle. Failure to observe these instructions may lead to immediate termination. It's time now for the show to begin. Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening.
You're not dreaming. You're shuffling. You're listening to the Sleepless Knights podcast, broadcast live from the Black Knight satellite. Paul is not in the Black Knight satellite anymore. He is in a escape pod or a life pod for the pODDcast. That would be Paul Sanders, my co-host from Bestow TV, to sort of fend off the boredom. Paul and I have been playing some games. Paul is going to be dealing some cards here any minute so that we can play an enjoyable game while he's stuck on the life pod. Right, Paul?
Can you stop stalling now? It's like, come on. We got some cards here.
All right, we'll lay them out here.
Okay.
Deal them out. Deal.
Well, I have them all. I have them all out in front of you. Okay.
So you've already dealt the cards.
I've already dealt the cards.
Okay.
So I'm gonna keep my cards to myself because we want to keep this fair. Do you want to know what you got?
Well, yeah, of course I want to know what I have. So what cards do I have, Paul?
Okay, you have an ace of spades.
Ace of spades. Okay.
You have a queen of hearts, and it looks like you got to start to a good run here.
Okay, ace of spades, queen of hearts.
Three of diamonds. Ooh, that's kind of rough. Optimus Prime.
Optimus Prime. He's on the card. Optimus Prime.
Yeah, and
is it like, what's the suit? Is it Autobots? A three of Autobots, or
obviously it's Autobots. Why wouldn't it be Autobots? And,
all right, so an Optimus Prime card somehow. Okay.
Oh, this is a Black Lotus card from Magic the Gathering. I mean, this actually is worth some money.
Oh, Black Lotus.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to put this.
That's worth money.
I'm going to put this. I don't know how that got in there. I'm going to put this to the side. But you got two gold dragons.
Two gold dragons. Okay, ace of. What did you say the first one was? Ace of spades.
Ace of spades.
Queen and an Optimus Prime.
Two gold dragons.
Gold dragons.
Okay. Do you want to be hit? Should I hit you?
I guess I'll draw a card, right?
Okay. I'm gonna go fish. You can go ahead and draw the card.
Okay. So I'm drawing another card. I guess. I mean, I don't. So what card is it now?
It's a Gundam suit.
Gundam suit. Well, how many points is that worth?
Well, his defense is 4.
Defense is 4.
And attack is 2.
Now, can I play him in defense, or should I hold on to him?
Well, the card says deal 2 damage to 1 mech. Use this ability only during a mission. We're not in the mission right now.
Okay, so during the mission, huh?
Right.
So let's see. Do you have any 3s?
No, I don't. But I have rummy. And
you have
there
rummy.
It is. I won the game.
Oh, yeah. You won another hand. Paul, you've been winning like every hand for the last 2 hours. No, not whatever. Hey. I mean, this is not very fun if I can't see any of the cards. You see your cards. I don't even know if you're saying the cards that you even have because I can't see anything.
Have I ever cheated you before? Like, come on. You just don't want to show out the chimp bucks anymore.
The chimpunks are hard to come by, especially when I can't even pronounce chimpunks. Chimpunks, don't grow on trees. And, it's like I've bet so many chimpunks that I can't even see straight, and it's just like, and I don't even know if it's a straight. It could be a flush. It could be anything. It just, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. I feel like we should just find a better way to keep playing games. I mean, we played games on the pODDcast before. Do we?
Well,
we?
If you could get the rescue ship out to me sooner, this would be like a lot easier to play in person than it would. I mean, I'm doing my best here. How else am I going to have to do that? I'm going to have to read you the cards. I mean,
all right.
The rate we're going is going to be, I'm surprised it's going to be, it was another 2 years before we do another podcast anyway.
Well, if I didn't bet all my chimp bucks, I would have been able to afford to, procure a rescue ship for you. But now now we just we're going to have to wait.
Well, I'm sure that you can apply for some Gorilla credit.
Yeah, I could apply for Gorilla credit. I don't know. Those guys are sharks when they're not gorillas.
Be careful what you say.
All right, so that's fine. So maybe we'll try to play when we get you back here. Maybe we could try to play Movie Buff again, like we did when we had the In the Buff episode. Or didn't we play a board game like in the second episode?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't listen to that crap.
Is this are we just repeating ourselves? Is this any point of doing this if we're just going to do the same tired bits like over and over again?
Well, speaking of same tired bits, I still have some questions left over from the last episode.
All right. Well, let's dig that dry well. Keep plucking that chicken.
Let's see here. Asked it. Spam mail.
Are you getting stinger pictures from the Honey Nut Cheerios being on your Snapchat?
You didn't give me enough chimp bucks to get it, so
you have to pay for the stinger pics?
Yeah. Stinger pics aren't for free.
I feel like ladies get those all the time. Insert joke here. Talk amongst yourselves, everyone.
Sing do 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 do. Okay,
we have
here
questions?
We go.
Yes,
found one. Sorry,
questions.
took me a while.
We've got answers.
I had to dig through all that spam mail and bullshit and
a Nigerian prince wants to give you Viagra.
I have this unsightly rash from dating certain crazed drunken ficus. Any advice from Zap Rowdowser?
Oh boy, Zap.
# itchy in Calgary.
Yeah, man. Well, let me tell you, Zap, once you start dating plants, you get all kinds of weird fungus. That definitely comes with the territory. I would try perhaps, a little bit of Miracle Grow. That might help the situation. I don't know about that would help the plant situation. I don't know what you can do for yourself. You could try some cortisone, I suppose. That might stop the itching at least. So I hope that answers your question. Obviously, this person's dating Miss Mittens. I should be more angry about this question because this is a person who is fraternizing with my co-host, Miss Mittens from the show, who is a houseplant and not a ficus. A lot of people think she's a ficus. She's some sort of ivy, but it's a special. She's a relative to. She was related to a philodendron. She had an Uncle Phil, who's a philodendron, and she is a kind of a very special. I think you have to watch the Wasp Woman episode, and it shows the seed packet. And I think it describes the actual breed of plant that she is. But I can't think of it off the top of my head. There it is.
Speaking of Miss Mittens.
Yes.
Robert Schneck says, isn't it about time for Miss Mittens to have an intervention?
I think these questions are related, right? Miss Mittens
I don't see the relation, but I guess Robert Schneck could be the cousin to the last caller.
To Zap Rowdowser or whatever. I think that Miss Mittens' alcoholism is related to her promiscuity. But I think what's interesting about that is that Miss Mittens has always, well, I guess she hasn't always had a drinking problem. I think maybe Mr. Lobo perhaps drove her to that condition just by making her watch misunderstood movies for 19 years. Miss Mittens came onto the show She was an ordinary house plant, and she was delivered to us by the meteorologist at KXTV. So anyway, so she was just a regular plant, and she had regular plant things, and we watered her, and then we started talking to her like a person, and I started hearing her talk back, and the audience apparently could hear her talk back too, and so we just talked more and more, and the more I talked to her, the more she drank, and she stopped drinking water at some point, and at another point she drank so much that she reverted back to her prehistoric primitive man-eating plant state. She becomes a monster when she drinks too much, and you'll notice that in a few of the episodes, Horror Party Beach and Day of the Triffids specifically. But I hope that answers your question. I am not going to try to do an intervention with a plant that can turn into a monster. So perhaps you can get some people who care about her a little more than I do, who can do that intervention, and I hope that answers your question. And why don't we try and answer some more questions when we come back from this next break?
Okay, you want me to deal you in?
Oh, absolutely. Give me 8 cards this time, though.
Name, Cornelius, adult chimpanzee, speaks English. Name, Zira, female chimpanzee, practices medicine. Name, baby Philo, infant chimpanzee, holds a secret that can destroy mankind.
They come from an incredible planet of apes. They survived a war beneath the planet of apes. Now it's Earth 1973, and you're in for a surprise. Are they friendly visitors or invaders from the future? Why does the president's advisor want them shot? What is baby Milo's incredible secret? All the surprising answers are in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. All new from 20th Century Fox, rated G, all ages. Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
And we're back with more of the Sleepless Nights pODDcast. This is Paul and Lobo here, keeping it real for you, playing some games. I think I got a full Monty, right? Is that what I have now?
Yeah. I mean, I bet my pants, so I guess that's what that leads to, is a full Monty, right?
Yeah, the pants are on the table now. So
Pants are on the table. I don't know how they got there. I think the gravity kicked in and they just fell off down from the ceiling.
Yeah. Well, you know, the sisterhood of the traveling pants exists, so there could be a brotherhood of the traveling pants as well, I suppose, especially when you're in space.
Or the pants walk on their own.
Yes. Mm-hmm. One small step for pants, one giant leap for Paul's lower half of his body.
I don't even want to go on that trip.
Yeah, I think we need to stop. Quit while we're behind.
Speaking of behinds.
Yes. You have another question for Mr. Lobo, Paul.
Hold on.
Is this from the Mr. Lobo's Cinema Insomnia fan group on the Facebook?
That would be the very one.
Okay.
With that being said, this question comes from YouTube.
Okay, fine, whatever. Perfect setup. Perfect segue. Once again.
Just like a clock, right? 2 times
Yeah.
a day.
Mm-hmm.
3 times on Saturday.
Like a Swiss sandwich.
Jada commented on one of our videos, which, by the way, he didn't watch all of yet, and he started this 8 hours ago, and it's only an hour-long podcast.
Yeah,
so
and why should he?
And, I don't blame him. I actually didn't start it all, so...
Yeah.
But anyway, Jada asks, has Mr. Lobo ever considered doing any books, ebook readings? He has a one-of-a-kind voice, and he likes to read, that is. If he likes to read, that is. Sorry, I am learning English from this Russian book over here on this end table. Give me a second. Would this be something that the fans, our listeners in general, would enjoy? I'd assume it'd be horror in theme, but he may even get away with other genres like fantasy and whatnot. I'm not sure what the whatnot fantasy is, but I'll let you fill that in. But now he's going to go rewatch Mr. Lobo's live. So he's not even going to finish the podcast. He's just going to go rewatch Last Man. I mean, you know what?
Well,
I don't blame this guy.
He probably started listening to the podcast.
Assuming it's a he. Actually,
I guess it could be anything. I guess we don't want to. We'll just say they.
Okay.
And we'll keep our pronouns vague, and then that way we won't hurt Jada's feelings if Jada is male or female or undecided.
Honestly, this comment, he didn't listen to the last podcast. He didn't get it very far, so I doubt he's going to get far. He, she is going to get this far into this answer anyway.
Don't say he, she, Paul. That's very insensitive.
Okay.
He's not. Paul. Even if Jada's a he, she, that's his own business.
But there was a comma.
Even if he's okay, never mind. Even if he's in a comma, maybe he'll come out of that comma one day and he'll realize that he's been asleep through all of this.
Well, he has to go into a comma, chameleon. Because he comes and goes.
Paul. Yeah, you come and go.
And he may come and
also,
go.
Paul. I just wish you'd go. I guess you went for a while, but now you're back. So you come and go also, Paul. You're a comma chameleon yourself.
I guess.
So answering the question, I guess there's a few aspects of this I'd like to address. One of them is Mr. Lobo hates to read. I hate words. I like cartoons and coloring books, and movie. That's why I host a movie show, is because I didn't want to read books, and it's hard enough when I've got an acting role in a movie where I've got to memorize, a handful of lines of dialogue that I have to read over and over again and commit to memory. But that being said, for my fans, I would be willing to put my distinctive voice on a short story, perhaps, if there weren't any hard words, particularly hard words in them, or perhaps if those words were phonetically broken down, I could perhaps read some book words for people, stories. And I think that I have done some audio material. I mean, I have done audio material. There's Mr. Lobo's, The Horrible Noises of Mr. Lobo's Very Bad Manner. There's Hypnosis for Hipsters. Both of those combined is like 2 hours of Mr. Lobo talking. So if you like to hear me talk, those are two things that you can listen to. But I could probably read some books on YouTube. And also, why, Jada, are you watching The Last Man on Earth again? I mean, I feel like there's 90 episodes of Cinema Insomnia on Vimeo. There's so many on OSI 74. And there's even more stuff on the YouTube. Aaron started yet another YouTube for some reason. I guess he thought that if it got shut down for copyright, from weirdness, it wouldn't affect the Mr. Lobo YouTube. But there is a Cinema Insomnia YouTube, and there's just full episodes of Cinema Insomnia on there. You don't have to just keep watching Last Man on Earth, Jada, if you don't want to. But also, if you're going to ask a question to the podcast, you should at least listen to the whole damn podcast.
Take that.
And that's it. That's all I have to say to you, Jada.
That's all I have to say about that. And now we're going to segue into a little bit that now that that's all been said, check out Mr. Lobo's next audiobook due out next week. Mr. Lobo reads the dictionary, followed by Mr. Lobo reads the phone book.
Mr. Lobo loves the dictionary. In fact, the dictionary is Mr. Lobo's favorite book because you can pick it up anywhere. You can open it on any page. It only gives you one word at a time. And it contains the words that are used in every other book. So you're basically reading every book by reading the dictionary. So it doesn't waste your time. That's what I like about it.
Awesome.
Yes. Do we have another question, Paul?
Super mayonnaise.
I think it might be super ramen something. Super ramen? I think it is.
Super ramenize one.
Super ramenize, which I don't know what that means. I guess he's eaten so much ramen.
Or they like super mayonnaise. Super mayonnaise.
There's super mayonnaise got in their eyes somehow.
Only once, though, because there's a one at the end. I mean, they
One.
must be proud. They're the first and only person to have that.
Yeah, or maybe there was another one, and then they
Username.
had to add a 1
So
on the
there,
end
there
of
was
theirs.
a 0.
I don't know. Maybe Super Ramenize 0 was already taken, and then they had to go to Super Ramenize 1, I guess.
If it's like me, it's probably because you forgot your password and you got to create a new damn account.
Oh,
So they could have the same.
Twitter is like that. I feel like there's a lot of Twitter handles that are like that.
Well,
so
this person asks,
yes,
or it might be an object if they're Raymond or.
well, I know
mayonnaise.
this person sort of because they're a fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd. I think that's how they discovered Cinema Insomnia, and Mr. Lobo was through that.
Oh, well, then I'm throwing this question out. Okay, next question.
Oh,
I'm kidding. What is the creepiest non-horror movie you have seen?
wow. Creepiest non-horror movie. You just dropped a bomb there on Mr. Lobo.
I'm sorry. I will wipe. Take care of that. I will sanitize.
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Lobo.
you, Paul. This is at least we're not talking about arts again.
We could.
No, but let's not. So, I think Eraserhead is not a horror movie. I think that would probably be one of the creepiest non-horror movies that I have seen. The atmosphere of that is really upsetting. And then I would also think that like something like Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts, that was something that was not horror. And, Disney movie about prostitutes was pretty upsetting for me when I saw it.
So upsetting that we made a Mr. Lobo Does around it.
And it's so upsetting that we used it as fodder for satire, and Mr. Lobo Does. The other thing I would think of right away is Home Alone, the movie Home Alone. It was the #1 movie in the country, and it knocked Star Wars off its perch as far as the biggest grossing film of all time. And I had decided then and there that God must not exist. So that was so bad that it took my faith away. That's how upset I was by Home Alone.
And you got to have your faith.
Yes, Michael, we've gone from, these topical musicians like Culture Club and George Michael.
All in the 80s.
How long have you been in that pod?
Long enough.
Yeah. All right.
Like Superman. But
so did we answer a question? I feel like sort of did.
I don't know. I tuned you out about half an hour ago. So I will assume that you did.
We'll assume we did.
Okay. Andrew Jake, speaking of Superman and speaking of, Planet of the Apes and stuff, Andrew Jake he's a cosplayer. So I'm pretty sure that since the apes took over, I'm sure he's got his ape costume and he's out there and he's schlepping along and, he's making them.
You say, are you feeling like he's just blended in? Like all the cosplayers have just made themselves ape costumes so that they can assimilate?
And they just assimilate and not have to work in the mines.
Lobotomized and live in cages.
Sure. Mr. Lobo.
Planet of the Apes stuff.
Oh, I never saw it.
Oh. I'm glad that we wrote the whole thing around Planet of the Apes when you've never seen it.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm kidding. I saw it.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, that one that came out in the 90s? Yeah.
Yes, the Tim Burton movie.
Tim Burton one? Yeah, I saw it. I know. I'm hip. I'm with it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm on it.
Not really speaking of Tim Burton, but I would also think going back to the other question, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was really weird and upsetting as a kid, especially the boat ride sequence. And that is not a horror movie at all. And that movie gave me bedwetting nightmares. So there's another one for you. Sorry. What's the question at hand? I'm sorry, Paul.
So Andrew Jake wants to know, what's Mr. Lobo's favorite horror movie? And then he wants to know, what is your favorite so bad it's good horror movie?
Oh, gosh.
Jake with the hard-hitting questions.
I'm getting killed with these questions because I feel like, I don't want to be want to be like maudlin or trite and say, oh, that's like picking a favorite child. But I do feel like, your favorite movie, usually people have that list of their favorite movies, and it's that same list they've been carrying around from when they were 12 years old. Oh, Star Wars and Blade Runner and Indiana Jones and Back to the Future. And, it's that whatever that list is when you were 12, you keep thinking that those are your favorite movies forever, even if you haven't seen them in 10 years. So my perspective on it now is that I kind of feel like if you ask me this question tomorrow, I may have a totally different answer for you. So I know you're not going to want to hear that.
I believe we had an entire podcast.
Did we have a whole
ages
podcast
ago
with this idea?
Where we did this whole idea. We went through Paul Lobo's list and we went through a whole bunch of stuff.
And then I probably said this exact same diatribe about how the list is always fluctuating.
I believe we all said that. I'm going to contact Jada and see if they bothered to listen to that episode and see if they can tell me.
Yeah, and I would ask Jada, who's listening to the old podcast episodes, what happened, and ask them if I said that my favorite straight horror film was Return of the Living Dead. Because I feel like that Return of the Living Dead is one of those movies that kind of hits on a lot of the right levels for me, as far as it's legitimately, it's got some legitimately scary moments. It's funny. I love the story of it. I think Dan O'Bannon did an amazing job. Dan O'Bannon, who wrote Alien, and all that. And then as far as So Bad It's Good episode or thing or whatever, I think So Bad It's Good, which again, I hate that term, So Bad It's Good. They're not bad movies. They're just misunderstood. So misunderstood it's good. I like how that flows off the tongue. So misunderstood it's good. Write that down, Paul. I would have to say Plan 9 from Outer Space. It is famously the worst movie ever made, but it is so near and dear to my heart, and especially after working on the remake, those would be the two I would say. So thank you very much for those questions. What was the name of the person who asked those questions?
I don't remember anymore.
I don't care either. I guess we're going to go to a commercial, and we'll be right back with more Sleepless Nights podcast.
Hey, Mr. Lobo.
Oh, Paul, what's up?
I have a question here about this memo that I got from you. It says that Bestow TV now needs a commercial?
Oh, whoever wrote that should get fired, I think.
I'm not quite sure what to put into said commercial.
For Bestow TV, I mean, you just talk about your channel.
Like creative continuity and its sister show, bonus content?
Right, all the convention culture and the interviews with celebrities and all that stuff, sure.
Well, I guess I could also mention the cosplay montages, costumes.
Costumes, right. Astonishing cosplay montage set to an epic soundtrack.
I guess there's convention rewind, too.
Those are great. We've run those on OSI 74.
I guess that's all I need, so I guess all I have to...
Are you sure? Because I think there's one other show that you produced for a Bestow.
I don't know what you're talking about.
With Mr. Lobo.
Yeah,
that we do together, the thing that we do. Remember all those videos we did?
Oh, like Mr. Lobo does.
Yes, Mr. Lobo does, of course.
That's awesome. I'm going to get right on this, and I'm going to write up the script.
Hey, wait, Paul. You forgot to tell him to go to bestow.tv. Idiot.
You're not dreaming. You're still listening to the Sleepless Nights podcast with Mr. Lobo and Paul. And we were talking about Plan 9 from Outer Space being a favorite. When I watch that movie, I feel like it's 3 a.m. And I like that feeling. There's a few movies that have that. The Brain That Wouldn't Die gives me that feeling. Night of the Creeps kind of gives me that feeling. There's a few that have that 3 a.m. feel. Do you ever think about how certain movies feel to you, Paul?
Huh? What? Oh, I'm sorry. What you're saying?
Certain movies, do they give you a certain feeling?
There's those movies out there that give you the special like jingle in your jangle, and
no, not that feeling. That's a different. That's a a totally different
Let
feeling.
me side rail this question by how about those movies that are better as memories than they are actually watching? Because then you go and you watch them, and they're excruciating.
Oh, wow.
And you're
Yes.
like,
Is
these
there a
are good
movie that
movies, and they're good. Well, you're not going to like the answer I'm going to give, but the most common
Paul,
answer
yes.
is
Yes.
is Blade Runner.
Of what? Of a movie that you liked when you were a kid that you don't like now?
That's a movie that is liked more so of the memory of the movie versus actually watching the movie.
Oh.
And it's not mine personally, but that's the zeitgeist. That's the go-to movie where people are like, I like the idea of this movie, but to sit down and watch it, it's not that. It's a slog to get through. Is there any movie that you think that's like that?
Wow. Well, first of all, that is definitely not a movie that I feel that way about, because I've watched Blade Runner at least 40 times, and that's a low estimate. But I think I just like living in that world. That's a very, I think that movie is very atmospheric and sort of nonlinear, you know. And if you're not just there to sort of just be in that world, then it can be a slog, because plot-wise, they don't give you a whole lot. You kind of have to surmise a lot of the plot. A lot of it's going inside your head while you're watching it. You know, they're letting the audience think about the things that are happening and come to their own conclusions. A movie that I remember as a kid, absolutely loving, as much as we talk about Star Wars in this movie, on this podcast, I love this movie probably equally to Star Wars as a kid. And I thought, wow, another Star Wars movie. That's how I felt about it. And what I'm talking about is Star Crash, which we did host on Cinema Insomnia. And then, of course, it's the famous banned episode where we were ordered to destroy all the DVDs of that episode. But that's another story for another time. But that movie was like a bad Italian ripoff of Star Wars. And there's even lightsabers in it. And it's like Carolyn Monroe, who is a model, a Bond girl. She's sort of like a Barbarella type hero called Stella Star. There's a robot with a Southern accent, like a robot that talks like Slim Pickens. As a kid, I thought, this is amazing. It's got everything. And then for years, I told people, oh, you like Star Wars? Oh, yeah, you should watch this Star Crash movie. And I legitimately thought in my head it was a much more polished film than it really was. And then watching it again as an adult, I remember initially being so embarrassed. Like, wow, I've been telling people for years that this is as good as Star Wars, the movie for me that I feel that way about. And there's a ton of them. You have a movie like that, Paul, where you watching it is, I mean, how do you feel about, like, have you gone back to like the Iron Man movies or movies from like just a few years ago?
I've gone back to Iron Man. The Marvel stuff. No, I mean, that stuff doesn't really bother me. You were saying,
it doesn't have to bother you, but maybe it wasn't as spectacular or as amazing as you did. Like I felt that way about Age of Ultron, where I think when I saw it, I was entertained, but then I immediately forgot everything about it. Like, and when I tried to watch it again, it was not nearly as good as I remembered.
Maybe like the Lost World, the second Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah. I think I had that effect too. Is that just like wishful thinking where you want to like it really bad?
Yeah, because there was something that was really, really good in the theater, or you were in the moment at the time, and then it's like, I'm going to, now you buy the movies. You can't get one movie anymore. You get the entire collector set or whatnot. And it's like, oh, great, Jurassic Park 3, yay. But then, going to the second one, and it's like you can't stay awake past a certain point where it's like,
yeah. I remember being I do remember being a little disappointed that it was about Malcolm being a deadbeat dad, and there was like all these sort of aspects to it that were sort of not great,
disjointed, disjarring.
And there weren't enough new characters that were as interesting as the characters from the original movie that weren't present in the second movie.
What came to mind is A Nightmare Before Christmas. That's a movie, to me, is more better in my mind than it is to watch. And it's one of those things where like the kids latched onto it and they enjoyed that movie and want to watch that movie. And I get to the first song and I'm out.
Wow. Wow. Now I have not watched it in a long time, so maybe I may have a different perspective on that.
I think my perspective when it comes to that kind of stuff is that I have problems with movies that are overhyped. Things like that, where it's like everybody loves it. So, or like, even like say up to Frozen, where it's anywhere and everywhere to the point where it's just obnoxious.
Yeah. And it's hard to know like whether like if it's just overhyped or maybe you're a sociopath, right? Is that where
a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I didn't really come here for a psych analysis.
All right, because I feel like in those situations, a lot of times I want to hate something because it's popular, and I have the opposite effect that I want to love something because it's unpopular. Like I have that like with Nightmare Before Christmas. When that movie came out, it was a bomb. It did not make a lot of money. It was highly criticized when it came out. It was one of People Magazine's 10 worst films of the year, which made me stop reading People Magazine. And I think for me as an animation fan, I was excited there was stop motion animation still happening. And I remember seeing it in the theater, and it affected me really strongly, and I loved it. And I also lived in San Francisco, where I worked with a lot of people who worked on that film. So I had kind of a personal connection. We almost shared a cab with the guy who did the voice of Santa Claus. So I kind of have like a personal connection to the movie. I kind of have a again, reverse or not reverse sociopath. I guess I am a sociopath to the degree where I want to like something. I root for the underdog a lot of times, where if a movie like an Alien 3, like a lot of people hated that movie because they kill Newt and Hicks and Bishop and all the cool characters from Aliens. And then they do this really miserable, bleak storyline. And then spoilers, Ripley dies at the end of the episode, at the end of the film, to kill the queen alien that's inside of her. And I just remember the audience hating it so much, like, people like, the children crying and parents getting into fights with each other. And it was like a midnight showing. And I was like, what are all these kids doing here for this R-rated movie anyway? So for me, I just started loving Alien 3 because everybody hated it so much. So that's a different answer of a different question, I suppose, as far as like where you want to like something because everyone hates it, or you want to hate something because everybody likes it. And I certainly hate Nightmare Before Christmas fans. A lot of them are really annoying in their love for Nightmare Before Christmas. And that makes me not enjoy it as much or want to even watch it like I did back in the 90s. So maybe there is something to that overhyped aspect of it.
I mean, for me, when that movie came out, that was roughly around when I was in high school or college. So everybody was already singing those songs and everything else, and all the buddies and fellow classmates and everything were like hyperly into all that stuff. And you're on bus trips or to wherever, and they're playing that movie because that's everybody's favorite movie and stuff. So it kind of got run into the ground, I guess, for me fairly early. And then when like the kids got old enough, and then they're into it, and now it's like this rediscovery, and all their friends like it. And so it was for a time there, it had come back, and everybody was singing the songs, and you go to different events, and they're playing the music, and there's this whole revival to it. And I think it was just kind of one of those aspects where it was just kind of like, although a bunch of metal groups got together and put out a Nightmare Before Christmas song compilation. I love that album.
And that was good, huh?
It's Marilyn Manson and
wow.
Korn and Amy... can't think of her name.
Amy who? Amy Winehouse?
No, not her.
Amy Grant?
Evanescence. She's from Evanescence. It's Evanescence. I don't know if it's actually Evanescence, but it's her from...
I don't know. I don't know my
Anyway.
music. See, you're a music guy, Paul, so I could see that getting under your skin a little quicker, perhaps too, because you can. No, I'm serious though. You've got a music background.
I just get annoyed when it's hammered in so often. Like it's like you listen to modern radio, and it's always the top 10 music five times in like an hour, and it's like, okay, this band has other songs. Can we play something else? Because I'm starting to hate Tool right this moment. Because I don't want to hear this song anymore. Can we play something else from them? Or
I feel like the hits of the 90s have replaced Muzak. Like you go to a restaurant or you're in an elevator, and it's just like Jane's Addiction and Tool and Smashing Pumpkins and I don't know, all of those other ones, Stone Temple Pilots. I can't stand it. I just feel like it's just that same stuff over and over. I used to be annoyed by all the classic rock stuff, where it's like, wow, it's really Led Zeppelin every day of your life for the rest of your life. Like this is, at what point does that lose its effectiveness for you? I feel like like first it was the classic rock of the 70s,
it's
and it just
rock, man. Turn it
never
up.
freedom rock. Whoa, dude. And then for some reason it's like I loved all the music of the 80s, but for some reason it skipped the 80s, except you're free in Hot Topic or someplace where overweight women's clothes are sold. Then I guess it's all 80s. But other than that, it like grocery stores and stuff, it's always the hits of the 90s. And I would listen to the hits of the 80s, and maybe just because I'm older, but I would listen to the hits of the 80s in a store or in a restaurant any day of the week before the hits of the 90s. Why don't we listen to a few classics? Why don't we take a moment and listen to these deep tracks, and then we'll be back with more Sleepless Nights of Insomnia.
1981, a virus from space kills all dogs and cats on the Earth. 1985, chimpanzees and gorillas are adopted as pets. The pets evolve into slaves, beaten and tortured victims of mankind. And now, a chimpanzee rises to give the word for the revolt of the apes.
My people will plot for the inevitable day of man's downfall. And that day is upon you now!
Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. It's all new, the biggest and most exciting ape picture yet, as a world of apes battles for domination of planet Earth. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes from 20th Century Fox. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. The most awesome spectacle in the annals of science fiction.
This is Mr. Lobo, and we're talking about movies that are overhyped. Paul, in the break, you were talking about a movie. You have a probably pretty different perspective on an overhyped movie, right?
Yeah. Now, like, people that listen to this podcast or know me know that I'm like into the Marvel stuff and how groundbreaking it is where they make these movies that they're not exactly from the comic books, but they're close to the comic books where they actually tie into each other. They build off of each other. They honor the source material. You can actually watch 22 of them, and they all make an overarching. They all interconnect. They all play in each other's sandbox. That kind of sounds perverted, but you know what I mean. And it's a kind of a fun aspect. It's from a perspective, it's an annoying aspect because it's like now, in order for me to watch Captain Marvel, I have to watch maybe I have to watch 17 other movies to understand what's going on in Captain Marvel, and that can be a little annoying aspect of it. But I think we live in a day and age where people consume this stuff over and over and over again, that 17 other movies to understand Captain Marvel may not necessarily be a bad thing either. Yeah. But Warner Brothers had put out the Joker movie.
Yes, the Joker. Critically acclaimed, Academy nominated, or did it won?
He won Best Actor.
Best Actor.
I don't know if there was any others, but I know Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah. Joaquin Phoenix. And it was one of those things where, I was reading into it and stuff, and it's like, oh, it's an origin film for the Joker. And it's like, oh, come on, man. Like, the Joker in the comics doesn't have an origin. Why are we Why are we doing this? Oh, it's a comic book movie. This is the way the comic book movies are going to go in the future. I felt it was an annoying aspect where it's like, I want, we waited all these years to get something like the MCU. And, the closest that you got were maybe like the X-Men or the Sam Raimi Spider-Man or Dolph Lundgren Punisher, where he's naked in the sewers meditating, or that's
and you know how I feel about the Punisher. No skull shirt, no deal.
Right.
No skull shirt, no deal. Okay, yes, keep going. You're going good. I'm with you.
I'm done. No, I'm done. No, I'm kidding. But it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it took forever to get those. I mean, the Sam Raimi films are good, but they're not like, they kind of take their own aspect. Hellboy, where Hellboy, is a good comic book, but when it became a film, it became its own entity. And Hellboy is a good movie, but is it a good comic book movie? So, I mean, I guess the question is it a comic book movie, or is it inspired by a comic book at this point?
Yeah, it's hard to say. What is an adaptation and what is an interpretation, or is there a difference? I don't know. That's a whole other question. I feel we could do a whole podcast just on that question.
I mean, it just feels like we got so far to get something that the fans wanted that was similar to the comic book aspect and the comic book feel and how this all builds together. And then Warner Brothers kind of takes that and goes back to the 90s with it. And it's like, oh, we're just going to do our own thing. We're going to do Michael Keaton Batman, where there's 4 different movies and they all don't really connect to each other. And even the ones that did have Michael Keaton don't really connect. I mean, was it Batman Returns doesn't really fit with Batman. And it just kind of feels like that's where Warner Brothers is kind of go. Because Warner Brothers tried to do their Marvel thing. And it's like, you don't have to be like Marvel, but at least try to do something with the fans. And when they were kind of trying, it was kind of like partial studio meddling and partial fans poo-pooing on whatever. And, it's all this stuff coming left and right that Warner Brothers finally went back to like, they're not going to, we're throwing this out the window. Wonder Woman is not going to, it's going to loosely tie back to the last Wonder Woman movie. Shazam's going to be in its own universe, and it's going to loosely tie. They're no longer going with the whole overarching universe with this thing. And
right.
It's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, now we're doing Joker, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, this is a comic book movie, and it's like, well, it's not really comic book. The main character is inspired by the comic book, but it doesn't really have source material. I mean, they kind of picked pieces from it, but it doesn't really have source material. And it's one of those things where it's a little bit frustrating, where it's like, oh, it's Academy Award winner, and this is what we're doing. And it's like, well, if this is successful, this is the future of that franchise. It's no longer that. And it's like, well, some arguments I got into where it's like, well, can't we have both? And it's like, yes and no, because when something like Joker becomes the norm, then you kind of lose that other thing. That's what everything becomes. Because now I guess Lex Luthor's the next one, and then a Joker 2, even though they didn't want a sequel. And, because the whole thing was Joaquin Phoenix was that he was offered a Marvel role. He didn't want a Marvel role because he didn't want to keep coming back to the character. So he accepted this because it's like, well, it's a one-off thing.
It's a standalone, yeah.
And he could walk away from it.
Right.
And my overall feeling with it was like, I didn't care if it made bajillion bucks in the theater. There was no way I was going to, because you support the films by your vote is your cash. So when you put your money in there, you're voting for, this is what I want.
I see. So you didn't feel the approach was right, so you didn't spend your money on it because you didn't like the approach from go. Well, that was how I felt about the Rob Zombie Halloween movie. I didn't go see it because I heard them talking about what they were doing and I wasn't on board.
So that's kind of an example of, I guess, maybe overhype, where everything's overhyped and everything was pushed, and this is an edgy movie, and it's kind of, I kind of feel hypocritical, because it's like, I'm prejudging this movie. I don't want to like this movie because of how they're pitching it to me, yet I can still like the Christopher Nolan movies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where they're that's the same idea. I mean, Christopher Nolan's Joker is not a comic book Joker.
No, and to be honest, I didn't like Batman Begins. I didn't like Batman Returns. I checked out halfway through Batman Returns. I don't even know what happens after that because it's just not my style of movie.
Spoiler, but I think he returned.
Oh, okay. All right. Now I get it.
Kind of in the title.
I mean, when the Joker was kind of like just a, and my apologies to Keith Ledger and his family, but I mean, the Joker is just the Crow as far as I'm concerned. It was joyless, and I don't go see comic book movies for gritty realism. I see comic book movies for fun, and I wasn't having fun with those movies.
To escape. I mean, that's the whole thing is about escapism, and it's like, you can have kind of the realism mixed in with the fantasy. I mean, you're asking me to accept this guy that's got bitten by a radioactive spider, but I can't, believe in a talking raccoon.
Yeah,
that's not gritty and real enough.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, I feel like it's all. I mean, every film is about a character that you enjoy, and if they're going to take you on a journey that you want to go on. Now, that being said, I enjoyed the Joker movie. I didn't have any expectations. All the other DC movies were so terrible that there wasn't much to lose as far as them. I mean, the thing I've been saying to DC, not that they've been listening to me because they don't even know I exist, but the only thing that I was hoping for DC is that they would just try and make one good movie, one good blessed movie at a time. Because even with the MCU, which is brilliant and all interconnected, it started with 3 really good Iron Man movies, and at least in my opinion, I'm not a Marvel expert. I'm not, but I mean, you have to have one good one at least first before you commit to a schedule of 17 movies that go out into 2075 when you don't even know if audiences like the first movie.
I didn't want to support it because this is not what I want Hollywood to do. And I'm just thinking that my dollar, which didn't really matter after the bajillions it made anyway, that this isn't really the way I wanted the franchise to go. But at the end of the day, it's a film. Who cares, And eventually, when it did come out on DVD, I did pick it up. I mean, I am interested in the filmmaker. I am interested in the actor. I'm interested in the character. I don't really firmly believe what they're calling a comic book movie, but who the hell am I? Me and 50 million nerds are all have difference of opinions.
Your vote counts. It's never throwing your vote away if you're voting with your conscience, and I respect that. I think if that's how you really feel and you didn't just get swept up in the hype, then you're being true to yourself. I mean, really, a movie is a very personal thing. It's like putting on a shirt or putting on a pair of pants. Not that you would know anything about putting on pants.
Hey.
But, it is very personal. The movies you watch say a lot more about yourself than they do about the movie. So you saw the Joker, and what did you think about the Joker?
I think it's a good movie about mental health and mental illness.
Uh-huh. Something we know a lot about.
Sure. It's I like the director.
It's a character study.
I
right?
like the Hangover. I like the Hangover. I like the character study. It's a comic book movie in name alone, because at the end of the day, when that movie's over, did any of that actually happen, or was that all in his head? Right,
and I think that's a good way of keeping it separate from everything else, because I don't actually feel like this movie can really mesh with any other movie.
And that's the way I kind of feel with it, where it's like it's a good character study, and it's a good look at mental health. You can almost pinpoint a part in the movie where it's like, well, did they intend that from this point on, this is all fantasy? Because they do introduce aspects of the movie where he's fantasizing things, and we the viewers are seeing this as, oh, this was real, until they tell us no, it's not.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's like at the end of the movie, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, this movie might not even happened in Gotham at all. This guy just may have read a comic book and this is his fantasy, you know?
Right, exactly right. And I think they did that on purpose so that they could take any of it back if they felt that it muddied the well. If it wasn't a success, they could take it all back. I feel that they probably wrote it that way on purpose.
And I like it from that aspect of filmmaking. I don't like it from the aspect of, oh, this is a comic book movie and this is going to be like the MCU and everything else, and it's not. And it's like it's its own movie, and I really wish they would have pushed it on its own thing.
No, I don't want to see Harley Quinn interacting with this Joker.
Right. At the end of the day, you could actually extract the Joker name in entirety and make it a psychological drama about any character who's slipping, and it would still kind of have the same effect. I think that having the Joker identity has people, you know, they can relate to what that character means from the comics, that there's something there that exists prior to going to that movie. But I don't necessarily think that that's specifically the Joker. That's specifically, you know, Tom and Martha Wayne. That's specifically Bruce Wayne and stuff like that. That can just be all part of his psychosis.
It could all be. I think it was a way to trick a bunch of man babies into watching a real movie.
And I watched it eventually, so I guess that analogy is right.
Mission accomplished.
I was definitely a baby about it. I've done nothing but cry about it.
I thought it was an excellent movie and an excellent character study, and I think that they would be shooting themselves in the face to try to sequelize it or integrate it into the other episodes. As far as comic book goes, this feels like a annual or a standalone comic book. Like, I remember when I was a kid, they did a Phantom Stranger comic book where they revealed his origin or origins. They had 4 different origins for the Phantom Stranger. And then at the very end of it, they're like, well, all of these could be his origin or none of these could be his origin. And it was just kind of like playing in the sandbox, like you were saying, playing in that sandbox, because this is a character we know, we have feelings about this character. And then we're letting different writers and different artists sort of show, stretch that character in a way that maybe is like an experiment or a character study or a standalone. I don't feel like that there is Boffo blockbuster series potential with this.
Right. But they're going to try to do it.
But they're going to try to because it made money.
Yeah. Right.
And honestly, what they needed to come away from with this, with the Joker, what they needed to cut with it, what the takeaway should have been, okay, we found the best actor we could find, not the biggest name, not anything else, but the best actor we could find. We found the best writer we could find. We found the best director we could find. We came up with a good story that we thought was compelling, and then when it was finished, we watched it and all decided it was worth putting out. And we put it out there, and it was successful on its own merits. I don't think the DC Comics guys are at a point where they can really successfully try to do a Marvel MCU thing. And I don't know if anyone ever again will be able to duplicate that formula that Marvel did. I think some of that was magic. I think some of that was kismet. Some of that was dumb luck, you know?
Well, I mean, I think part of that I want is it doesn't have to be as super involved with, as the Marvel universe or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Where it's like, it's like, as bad as Batman and Robin was, I lost my shit when they're like, oh, he's halfway to Metropolis now, and it's like, it shows that there's a bigger universe and that there's crossover potential. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, I kind of want to see where that they are kind of interconnected, but they don't have to go to the degree of the Marvel movies. Like, you don't have to watch 17 movies to understand how, Superman works. That's fine with me, but to understand that Superman and Batman can coexist, and not to necessarily do the shitty Batman versus Superman again, but something along that lines where they can have adventures together. And even to a degree, I don't agree with them saying, all right, well, now the sequels no longer have any tie to anything else. So the next Wonder Woman movie, it has no tie to the Wonder Woman movie before it. And it's like, I kind of would like, even if it's the microcosm of that, where the sequel still has a tie to itself. You know, if you're making, if you're pushing out Wonder Woman movies, please, you know, have some sort of decency to follow some sort of structure, because that always drove me nuts about like the Batman movies of the 90s, or, you know, the late 80s, early 90s, where they connected, but they didn't really connect. You know, Spider-Man connected, but they didn't. Well, Spider-Man might be a bad one, but maybe like the X-Men. The X-Men don't really connect, you know, but they do, but they don't. And it's like, well, I like that they do, at least within their own microcosm, that at least that's the least thing that they can do, you know. It looks like that they are going to do that with Shazam, however. So it's like, well, at least they're going to do it with Shazam. You know, so I guess, you know, the hell with Wonder Woman and Aquaman or whatever else. But, you know, at least tie into yourself, you know, tie into your own source material.
Whatever you've established, try to be true to yourself and keep that universe going. I guess that is certainly a philosophy, you know. I mean, I think that there are obviously a lot of ways to eat that Reese's. I mean, I think about the movies that are serials that existed that before the MCU, the things that had the most longevity, they did kind of reinvent themselves. Like the Godzilla movies, I feel like don't tightly connect to each other very well.
Right.
The James Bond movies, really every James Bond movie is almost a reboot, where it's the same movie again with a different setting, different adventure. You know, I don't know if the James Bond movies all connect to each other. They don't necessarily contradict each other, but they don't necessarily connect to each other either. I remember the Star Trek movies were very frustrating because like Kirk's son is a different guy halfway through, and you know, we see the Genesis planet thing over across 3 movies, and you're just dying for it to be about anything else but the Genesis project. But then on the other side of it, it's like they don't even have the Enterprise. They've got like a different ship. And, you know, I remember as a kid kind of like, you know, being very frustrated with how off-brand some of the Star Trek movies were, you know. But I still enjoyed them all, you know. And I don't know, it's interesting because, you know, I feel like after the first Star Trek, which did make a lot of money, it had so much negative response that they just kind of rebooted it with Star Trek 2. I don't think Star Trek 2 matches up with anything in the first Star Trek.
I don't think so. No.
So, you know, I don't know. I mean, again, I think that the frustrating thing is that, you know, we have projects that don't have any sort of real authorship to them. You know, it's just like a group of a corporation deciding where the story is going to go based on what they think the commercial needs of the project are, you know? So, you know, at least with Marvel Comics as a comic book, you know, they had the same team for the most part behind most of those characters and most of those stories. And, you know, it didn't cost any more or cost any less. It was the same ink and the same paper, you know, making those characters come to life, and the stories and the characters had to be good because they couldn't hang it on a famous actor's name, or they couldn't, you know, dazzle anybody by spending an extra $100 million, you know?
Right.
So I think the maybe the bigger problem is that we, you know, and this is the problem with the movie we didn't talk about, Star Wars, is that, you know, you've got this ever-changing revolving door of studio heads and directors making these decisions, and they're all contradicting each other because there's this kind of fight for power behind the scenes, and this grab for money, trying to go whatever direction is going to make them the most amount of money.
And there's no singular vision. There's not one person behind it.
You know, I mean, at least
story,
right? And at least with Marvel, there was, you know, whatever you have to say about Stan Lee, at least we had that focal point. We had that figurehead. We had that idea of an author, you know.
And with the cinematic version, you have Kevin Feige, who make sure that vision carries over to the films and make sure that they stay on point and that they do interconnect.
Say what you like about George Lucas. I mean, he at least was the daddy of the whole thing. And at the end of the day, even if you hated the movie, you're like, well, that was the movie he wanted to make and it's his story to tell, you know?
Right.
And now we don't have that anymore. It's like, well, that's what these 5 executives wanted and that's what we got, you know? So, you know, I think that I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I hope that, you know, with everything turning upside down, you know, I mean, we don't even have movie theaters open right now. Maybe whoever's in charge will be listening to the fans more. Whoever's in charge will be listening to an artist, try to find someone who's a visionary, try to find someone who cares about it enough to be true to itself, whatever they decide is at the core of what they're trying to express. So thank you for joining us tonight. I guess we'll have the usual stuff tacked on the end, Paul, so I don't have to, who knows? I don't even have half that stuff's relevant anymore. Watch Cinema Insomnia. Watch, we've got episodes on Vimeo. We've got episodes on Amazon Prime. We've got DVDs at Alpha Video /oldies.com. And we'll see you next time for the next Sleepless Nights podcast. Paul, you going to deal us in one more time?
Yeah, I'll get one more time. And then
All right. Uno.
Oh, it's 52 card pickup.
You have been listening to the Sleepless Nights podcast, or should we say, pODDcast.
PODDcast.
Emphasis on the odd. Our theme is by Mars Homeworld at Deadhouse Music. Our opening announcement is by Ophelia Necro. She does a radio show called Suicide Watch. And you could reach Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com or find me on YouTube, YouTube/Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO. Mr. Lobo on Facebook, Facebook/MR.LOBO, or on Twitter at Mr. Lobo, MISTERLOBO.
Or you can find myself, Paul Sanders, or better known as Bestow TV, at bestow.tv, on YouTube /Bestow TV, on Twitter at BestowProd, PROD, and on Facebook, Bestow TV.
If you want to place an advertisement with this podcast, and gosh, why wouldn't you? We could be talking about you right now. Contact us, Mr. Lobo at cinemainsomnia.com. That's MRLOBO @CINEMAINSOMNIA.com. Or support us on Patreon. Patreon supporters get to hear this podcast before anyone else and a lot of other great stuff, right, Paul?
Sure.
Doesn't get it better than that, right? So come join the fun at
patreon.com/Sleepless Nights Podcast.
That's
patreon.com/Sleepless Nights Podcast.
Please stay up with us next week for another Sleepless Nights podcast. Or should we say, pODDcast.
PODDcast.
The best thing about being an insomniac is never having to say goodnight.
Good night.